Welcome to the Indu Daily.
It's great to be here.
Today we are going on a tour that feels a bit like a roller coaster. We're going to swing from the high-pressure world of U.S.-India trade negotiations right down to the dusty, difficult realities of rural employment in Andhra Pradesh.
And we're ending up on the English moors, of all places.
And ending up on the English moors. It's a classic mix, isn't it?
Yeah.
We have high geopolitics colliding with the very personal, very real struggles of daily life.
Absolutely. One story is about a $500 billion deal. The next is about a 10-rupee meal.
That's a perfect way to put it. And we have a lot to get through, so let's get right into it. The editorial section opens with a story that, it feels like it's rewriting India's global stance. It's titled The Price of Pragmatism. And it's about this proposed interim agreement on trade between India and the Trump-led U.S. administration.
Rewriting is definitely the right word. This isn't just a simple trade deal. It's a major geopolitical pivot.
Yeah.
And the context here is key. You have Washington and specifically President Trump, via social media and executive orders, making these huge unilateral announcements.
I'm just putting it out there.
Just putting it out there. And it feels like New Delhi is constantly playing catch up, just scrambling to react to the latest tweet.
The power dynamic feels off right from the start, doesn't it? But let's look at the actual demands, because the numbers are, frankly, eye-watering.
They are.
The U.S. has rescinded some punitive tariffs, which sounds good, but in exchange, they want India to cut tariffs to zero on U.S. goods.
Oh.
And on top of that, commit to buying $500 billion worth of Buy American products.
Yeah.
Wait, pause on that. $500 billion.
It's a staggering figure. It's hard to even comprehend. To put that in perspective for you, the total bilateral trade right now is, it's nowhere near a volume that would justify that kind of purchase order overnight.
So what does that number actually mean then?
Yeah.
It can't just be more agricultural goods.
No, absolutely not. This isn't about India buying more California almonds or a few more Harley-Davidsons. When you see a number like $500 billion, you have to think bigger.
Like what?
You're talking about massive defense contracts, multi-billion-dollar civil nuclear deals, long-term energy purchases. It effectively locks the Indian economy into the U.S. supply chain.
For how long?
For decades. It's not just a shopping list. You said it yourself. It's more like a marriage contract, and one with a very demanding partner.
And speaking of energy, that seems to be the elephant in the room here. The source mentions a very, very specific demand regarding oil.
Yes, and this is where that word in the title, pragmatism, might be costing India its autonomy. The U.S. demand is completely explicit. Stop buying Russian oil. Period. Full stop.
And the data suggests it's working.
It's already working. If you look at the numbers, India's Russian oil imports crashed to a 38-month low in December 2025. And it's not just a trend. The U.S. has actually set up a panel to monitor this.
A panel to monitor India's oil imports.
To monitor India's compliance.
Yeah.
So much for strategic autonomy, right?
Yeah, exactly. Back in 2022, 2023, India was famous for standing its ground, for buying cheap Russian oil despite all this Western pressure. It was a huge talking point. Now it just looks like we folded.
That's the core of the critique in this piece. The editorial draws a direct parallel to 2019, when India stopped buying Iranian and Venezuelan oil purely because of U.S. sanctions.
I remember that.
The argument is that by agreeing to this now, India is significantly narrowing its global options. You're moving away from a multipolar world where you can trade with everyone to a much more unipolar one where you basically have to follow Washington's lead.
And what does this do to India's image?
Yeah.
We spend so much time and energy positioning ourselves as the voice of the global South.
Well, it damages it severely. For years, India has been telling the BRICS nations, the developing world, that unilateral sanctions that aren't approved by the UN are, and I'm quoting here, unfair and unjustified.
Right.
So if India now bows to that exact kind of pressure, it just looks like we're trading our principles for a temporary economic truce. And that sets what the article calls a template risk.
A template risk? What's that?
It means if the U.S. knows this kind of pressure works for trade, why wouldn't they use it for defense? For data privacy regulations, for everything else. It becomes the new template for negotiation.
That's a very heavy geopolitical shadow to cast. But let's zoom in a bit to the domestic economy. The editorial section also has a piece that tackles India's labor codes, path to universal financial inclusion. Now, usually when I hear labor codes, I think of strikes and unions being angry. But this article is actually defending them.
It is, and it's making a fairly sophisticated economic argument. The core idea is that these new codes are trying to solve the problem of what you might call hollow wages.
Hollow wages, I've not heard that term.
Right. So in the past, a company might pay you, say, 20,000 rupees a month, but they'd structure it so your basic pay was only 6,000 rupees, and the rest was all these different allowances.
And they do that for a reason, I assume.
Of course. Because all your Social Security contributions, like the Provident Fund, are calculated on your basic pay. So a low basic pay meant the company saved a lot of money, but it also meant the worker had almost no real savings for retirement.
I see. It's a loophole. So the new code closes that loophole.
Exactly. The new rule mandates that wages, the basic pay part, must constitute at least 50% of your total remuneration. It forces that basic pay component up from maybe 30% to 50%.
So your take-home cash might dip a little in the short term?
It might slightly because more is going directly into your Provident Fund. But the long-term safety net becomes real. It's not hollow anymore.
That makes a lot of sense. The article also mentioned something about portability of benefits for gig workers. That sounds like a bit of jargon. What does it actually mean for, say, a Zomato or Swiggy driver?
Think of it like a backpack. Right now, if a gig worker leaves one platform, they often leave with nothing. All their benefits, if they had any, were tied to that specific company. Portability means their Social Security benefits, health insurance, accident cover, are attached to them, the individual worker, not the specific job. They put those credits in their backpack.
And take it with them.
If they switch from delivering food to driving a cab for another platform, that safety net travels with them. It's the first time the law formally recognizes these millions of workers.
So if this is all so good for workers, why are the trade unions striking?
Well, there is always a natural resistance to big changes, and there is a valid concern in some quarters that these codes also make it a bit easier to hire and fire people. But the counterargument presented here is about something called the multiplier effect.
Multiplier effect. Go on.
The idea is if workers feel financially secure, if they know they have gratuity coming after just 1 year of service instead of 5, which is another huge change in these codes.
A massive change.
Then they are more likely to spend their money. That consumption drives the domestic economy. It effectively redistributes value from capital, from corporate profits at places like TCS or Infosys, to labor, to the hands of regular people.
So it's a shift from corporate accumulation to worker consumption.
Nah.
Okay, I see the logic. Let's cross the border now. We're moving to the ground zero section, and the story here is incredibly vivid. The resurgence of Jamaat and the future of Bangladesh.
This piece really does transport you. It takes us to Mogbazar in Dhaka, to the headquarters of Jamaat Islami. And you have to remember, just a couple of years ago, this party was banned. Their leaders were in hiding or in exile or had been executed.
And now?
Now, it's a festival. The place is buzzing.
The description of the atmosphere is what's so striking. The reporter mentions cadres in business suits. That really stuck out to me. It's not the traditional image you have of a radical Islamist party.
That is a very, very calculated visual. The business suit is a signal. It's a signal to the West, to foreign diplomats, and to the Bangladeshi middle class.
What's the signal?
We are modern. We are professional. We are not the scary radicals you remember from the past. They are actively rebranding. But if you look past the suits, the ideology hasn't necessarily changed. They are mixing this high-level political strategy with very public, very traditional religious rituals, like prayer in the middle of a political rally.
And the election numbers, they seem to back them up. The BNP, their ally, won a landslide, but Jamaat itself won 68 seats. That's their highest ever.
Their highest ever. They've gone from being a pariah to a power player. But here's the twist that I found genuinely disturbing. The narrative they are spinning about how they got here.
The comparison to the 1971 war.
Yes. They are comparing the 2024 ouster of Sheikh Hasina to the 1971 liberation war. They call it a second liberation.
That just seems historically wrong.
It's more than wrong. It's the most dangerous part of this resurgence. By framing the 2024 uprising this way, they are effectively erasing or rewriting the history of 1971.
Because in 1971...
In 1971, Jamaat actively opposed independence. They sided with Pakistan. By equating their current struggle with that war, they are trying to wash away that historical stain and claim the mantle of patriotism.
And you can feel the fear in the voices of the people who are interviewed from the other side. There's a man named Nahan, a former Awami League supporter living in Janmandi. He sounds like he's living in a completely different country all of a sudden.
He is terrified. For people like him, The secular Bengali culture of Bangladesh, things like the February Book Fair, the traditions of Bengali nationalism, it feels like it's all under siege.
He mentions the book fair tradition was stopped.
He does, and that's not just a policy change, that's a cultural deletion. It's a signal that the old ways are over.
It sounds like a society that is just deeply, deeply polarized. On one side, you have these returnees from exile who feel completely vindicated, like they've won.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other, you have people who feel their entire history, their identity is being erased right before their eyes.
Exactly. The expert view in this piece is that while the overt violence of the revolution has stopped, a war zone mentality remains. The BNP is in power, but they are constantly looking over their shoulder at Jamaat.
And what's Jamaat's endgame?
Well, Jamaat has the momentum, and their ultimate goal, many people suspect, is the implementation of Sharia law. So what you have is a fragile government and a very ambitious, highly mobilized religious force. It's a powder keg.
From the volatility of Dhaka, let's come back to a different kind of tragedy in India. The Spotlight section has a report titled Rising Shadows, the Surge of Missing Persons in Kerala. The numbers here are just... they're really sad.
They are alarming. We are looking at a jump from about 8,700 missing person cases in 2020 to nearly 11,900 in 2024. That is a massive spike for a relatively small state.
A huge spike. And it's not just abstract numbers. The story of Simi and her husband, Thomas John, really brings this home. He went missing, Simi went to the police, and what did they tell her?
They told her to wait 24 hours.
Just wait.
That is the core systemic failure the article highlights. You know, they call it the golden hour in trauma care. The first hour is critical. It's the same for missing persons cases.
The first few hours are everything.
Everything. But the police often delay action for 24 hours. They cite mobile tracking protocols, or they just assume the person went off to blow off some steam.
And in Thomas John's case, that delay was...
It was fatal. By the time they finally got around to tracking him, he was dead.
That's just heartbreaking. Why is this happening? The police in the article cite things like family disputes or financial stress, but is there something else going on? The demographic seems to be very young, 16 to 25-year-olds.
That age group is the key. The analysis in the piece points to two major underreported drivers: drugs and organized crime.
Okay.
The article mentions the case of a young man named Vigil. He wasn't a runaway, he overdosed on narcotics, and his friends panicked. They buried his body to hide the evidence.
That is horrific.
It is. And then there's the even more chilling case of Hemachandran, a businessman. He was abducted over a financial dispute and buried. The police treated it as a standard missing person case for 16 months.
16 months. How is it finally solved?
By sheer luck. A leaked phone call between the perpetrators was intercepted, not through police work.
So the police are treating these cases as administrative files. Oh, he probably eloped, or he's in debt, he's hiding, when actually there might be a very serious crime in progress from the very first minute.
Precisely. The system is reactive, it's procedural. They wait for the person to come back or for a body to show up. The call to action in this article is for a fundamental shift to a proactive intervention.
And what would that look like?
Well, for starters, integrated data. It sounds so simple. But right now, if a boy goes missing in one district and an unidentified body is found in the next district, those two databases don't talk to each other fast enough.
That seems unbelievable.
It is, and that disconnect, that delay, is causing unimaginable agony for thousands of families like Simi's.
That disconnect between the system and the reality is a perfect segue to our next story, also in the Spotlight section. We're going to Andhra Pradesh to look at the rural employment divide. This is about the shift from the famous MGNREGA scheme to a new, very long acronym, VBG-RAMG.
Quite a mouthful, isn't it? Viksit Bharat Guarantee for Rozgar and Ajivika Mission. But beneath that shiny new name, there is a fundamental and worrying shift in how the state treats the poor.
The article tells this story through what it calls a tale of two villages, Babandaragutam and Ampapuram. And the difference between them is like night and day.
It really illustrates the inequality of opportunity built into the new system. Let's start with Ampapuram. It's a relatively wealthy village. The residents own land.
Okay, so they're landowners.
Right. So they use the employment scheme to build assets for themselves on their own land. Things like cattle sheds, oil palm plantations. They get the government money. They build the asset on their property. They get richer. The system works for them.
And then there is Bandaragutam.
Exactly. Bandaragutam is full of landless laborers. They don't have land to build a cattle shed on. They rely on community works, like digging out the village tank or building a road.
But there's a problem.
There's a huge catch. The main community asset, the village tank, has been privatized. It's been leased out for fish farming, so they can't desalt it. There are no other community works planned, so they have no work.
Wow.
You have residents like Jamaat who are struggling to get even a few weeks of employment in a whole year.
So the scheme works if you're already doing okay, but it completely fails you if you're destitute and landless. And now the policy itself is changing. The new mission promises 125 days of work instead of 100. That sounds good on paper, right?
On paper, it sounds like an improvement. But the devil is always in the detail. The old MGNREGA was demand-driven. That was its revolutionary
So
feature.
what does that mean, demand-driven?
It means that if I, as a villager, walk up to the local official and demand work legally, they have to give it to me within 15 days or pay me an unemployment allowance. It was a statutory,
Right to work.
a legal right to work. The new scheme. It's a notified system.
Meaning
The government decides when and where the work is available based on how much budget is left. It turns a right into a scheme. If the budget runs dry mid-year, the work just stops.
So the word guarantee in the new name.
It's not really a guarantee at all. There is no legal recourse for the worker if they don't get work.
And speaking of budgets running dry, there's a massive funding issue here for the state government too, isn't there?
This is the fiscal federalism problem. Previously, the central government paid for almost everything. Now the cost-sharing ratio is 60.4. The state has to pay 40% of the wage bill.
And for a state with tight finances, that's a huge burden.
It's an enormous burden. The fear among activists on the ground is that the state will simply start rationing work unofficially because they can't afford their share of the bill. So a woman like Jayama in Benaragudam isn't just fighting poverty, she's fighting a complex funding formula.
Let's stay on the topic of feeding the hungry, but move from the village to the city. The Spotlight section also covers the Indira Canteen, struggles and hopes of urban food security in Bangalore.
This is a really fascinating look at the ecosystem of urban survival. Indira canteens are these subsidized eateries, breakfast for 5 rupees, lunch for 10 rupees. In a city as expensive as Bengaluru, that is a lifeline.
It is, and I love the details in the article about who actually eats there. It's not just the homeless, as you might assume. You have Pura Karmika's sanitation workers, like Nagalakshmi. She says she has exactly 8 minutes to eat during her shift. 8 minutes. She can't go to a restaurant and wait for an order. This canteen is the only reason she eats a hot meal at all.
Speed and affordability are absolutely key. But the article points out another layer, which is safety.
Yes, for women.
For women, exactly.
Right.
A garment worker named Mumtaz points out that regular street food stalls are often very men-heavy. They can feel intimidating or unsafe for a woman trying to eat alone. The Indira Canteen provides a dignified, safe space.
That's such a subtle but important point. It's not just about calories, it's about dignity.
It's social infrastructure as much as it is food infrastructure.
But the food itself, the review in the article isn't exactly glowing. The author basically says it's rice, rice, rice.
And that is the nutrition gap. It's a very carb-heavy menu. It fills the belly, sure, but it doesn't nourish the muscles. The expert quoted in the piece compares it to the Amma canteens in Tamil Nadu, which make a point to incorporate lentils and sometimes dairy.
So more protein.
More protein. Here, because of budget cuts, protein is almost entirely missing. And for a sanitation worker doing heavy physical labor all day, a plate of rice just isn't enough fuel.
And why is the menu so poor? It comes down to politics, right?
Sadly, yes. It's a classic case of the political economy of welfare. When the opposing party came to power in the state a few years ago, they slashed the budget for these canteens from 145 crore rupees down to just 60 crore.
They starved the scheme.
They effectively starved the scheme because it was named after a leader from the rival party. It's incredible. Now, with a new administration and the new Greater Bengaluru Authority, there is a glimmer of hope for a revival. But the infrastructure, the kitchens are broken, the roofs are leaking, has suffered from years of neglect.
It's just so frustrating when the poor get caught in that kind of political crossfire. Now, let's zoom back out to the international stage for a moment. We started with U.S. trade pressure on India, and the foreign section gives us the missing piece of that puzzle. It's titled The Strategic Pivot, U.S. Foreign Policy in South Asia.
This article connects directly back to that $500 billion trade demand we talked about at the beginning. It features testimony from S. Paul Kapoor, who is a diplomat in the Trump administration.
And he is incredibly blunt about the U.S. strategy, isn't he?
He's shockingly blunt. He actually admits the coercion regarding the oil.
What does he say?
He says, and I'm quoting here, "We wanted them, India, to stop buying Russian oil, and they have." He views the drop in India's imports not as some market fluctuation, but as a clear strategic victory for U.S. pressure.
Okay, so this diplomat basically just confirms everything we suspected in that first editorial piece.
It confirms everything. It's a quiet part said out loud. And the bigger picture here, of course, is always China.
Always.
The explicit U.S. goal, as he states it, is to prevent a hostile power from dominating South Asia. They need India as a strategic counterweight. That core strategy hasn't changed since Bill Clinton.
But what's interesting is the divergence on the neighbors.
That's the real friction point.
Yeah.
The U.S. looks at the regime change in Bangladesh, what it calls a youth movement, and celebrates it as democratic progress.
And India looks at the same event and sees the business suits of Jamaat-e-Islami and gets very, very nervous.
Exactly. The U.S. sees democracy in action. India sees a potential security threat on its border. They are looking at the same picture and seeing two completely different things. And that means they could be working at cross purposes in the region.
Okay, we have covered some incredibly heavy ground today. Trade wars, labor struggles, missing persons, political upheavals. I think we need a moment to breathe.
I agree.
And the weekend review takes us to a place that feels timeless. The Brontë Parsonage Museum in Hareworth.
A perfect way to decompress. This story, Legacy of the Moors, is all about how a 19th century novel is still driving the economy of a small English village.
And it's being driven by modern pop culture. Apparently, a new Wuthering Heights film starring Margot Robbie has caused a massive spike in tourism and interest.
It's the beautiful cycle of literature, isn't it? A book written nearly 200 years ago inspires a movie today, which brings thousands of tourists back to see the original desolate moors that inspired it.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
But the detail in the article that really captivated me that I can't stop thinking about was the diary papers.
Oh, the tiny scripts. Tell us about those.
It says that Emily and Anne Brontë used to write these tiny, tiny notes to each other in microscopic handwriting on little scraps of paper. They would fold them up, hide them in a box, and make a pact to only open them and read them together every 4 years. It was like a time capsule of their hopes and dreams.
Wow. Every 4 years.
Can you imagine having that kind of patience?
Yeah.
Today, we broadcast our lives on Instagram instantly. They waited 4 years just to read their own private thoughts again.
It's a beautiful reminder of the value of an interior life, isn't it? In a world of loud political demands and constant breaking news, there is something so powerful about a quiet scrap of paper hidden in a box, just waiting to be discovered.
That is a lovely thought to end on. From the noise of geopolitics to the quiet of the moors.
It really shows the full range of the human experience, doesn't it? All in one day's newspaper.
It really does. Thank you for listening. If you want to provide suggestions, please contact on the Twitter handle given in the episode description. As always, we are eager to hear what our listeners want to be informed about. We wish you a great day.